Hello everyone, today I just wanted to sit down in my chair and have a chat with you all because I have to be honest, London has been very hot, as a lot of the UK has, and I do not cope well in heat. It's currently raining. We did have a storm and I'm terrified of lightning. I have really just been like a dramatic Victorian heroine, kind of like having to lie down because of the heat. I recently had a comment about whether publishing had changed me as a reader or as a social media user, and I kind of have been going back to this question and realised that I could just reply in a comment, but then it might be quite nice just to sit down and talk about some of the things that I've noticed in my own reading habits and what I notice in the book world since working in publishing. Before I get into that though, I also have to say thank you and reintroduce myself because I recently hit a new subscriber milestone. I'm aware that there are also some new people who have found me and have been commenting, so I thought I would introduce myself, and in a way it's quite a good video to introduce myself in terms of an introduction to my career. So for any of you who don't know, my name is Claire, I live in London, I work in publishing, one of the big 5 publishing houses, and I have an MA and obviously a BA in literature, and before moving into publishing I worked as a bookseller. I also want to make this video because I'm aware that my approach, because of my job role, will be very different for someone who works in editorial or writes or sales or anything else really. For a bit more context, I work in digital marketing for a digital commercial division. Firstly, in terms of the actual art of reading, I think working in publishing hasn't made me read any more or any less. It's probably made me read a bit less because I spent all my time with books. I felt this way when I was a bookseller. When your work is books, when you spend your time doing books, when you're checking on social media all the time for books, and then you have like a bookstagram and a booktube channel as well. My whole life is books, and sometimes it's like I don't want to look at books. I mean, it never feels like that. I just then decide to play Animal Crossing or watch a million different true crime documentaries instead. At first I felt guilty about that, but now I don't, because actually I feel like I have quite a big knowledge now of the trends in publishing. Obviously my mind and my brain is constantly expanding, my experience is constantly growing, so I don't know everything, far from it. But I definitely feel like I have a good grasp of what's popular, maybe what works, and it doesn't necessarily mean that I have to read all of those books. It's just about having a knowledge of the market, which is something that I think I really started to grow as a bookseller. The thing that it has made me aware of though is the type of books I read and the different kind of genres, I guess, especially when it comes to literary and commercial fiction. Working in commercial fiction itself has completely changed and radicalized how I look at the book industry and also how I look at what I read, and predominantly the snobbery that is around commercial fiction, and especially when that snobbery is aimed at genres like romance fiction. Obviously you'll have a bit of snobbery towards crime thrillers and that kind of, you know, trashy thriller, but there is no way as much kind of snobbery like leveraged at women's fiction, romance fiction in comparison to crime. Genre fiction obviously always gets more snobbery and therefore is often avoided by big prizes, for instance, but commercial fiction and women's fiction, we can talk about that term. It's a problematic term. I understand why it's used, I understand why we use it. It's quite a complex one. Maybe that's the thing for a different video. The fact that I work in commercial publishing for me is key to all of this and how it's changed my perceptions of books and my attitude as being a reader in general. Because I'm used to seeing the literary books be the bestsellers or the ones that I would expect to be, you know, the most read, it made me realise that it is actually commercial fiction that makes the most money. Like, it is commercial fiction that breaks through in order for publishers to publish those smaller literary gems. Our perceptions of what literary and commercial are often come into the types of readers that we think of. There's a lot of snobbery around commercial because it tends to be associated with more working class readers, and we can see why there is obviously an inherent classism in the separation between those two different types of literature. Because I'm interested in class politics anyway, that was always something that stood out to me. Now whenever I overlook books, I challenge why I've overlooked them. Or sometimes I do like, not another one of those books, and then I'm like, well, what's one of those books? What does that mean? when I want to read literary? Is it because I want to, you know, better myself? And then what does that mean, and what does that say about my own association with class? Like, it's problematic as fuck. We can't talk about class without acknowledging and talking about race, because that is a huge factor, especially when you're looking at a publishing industry which is predominantly white, predominantly run by white people, and predominantly publishes white people. Now I'm in the publishing industry itself, I kind of am very much for like changing the system from within, and that's something I'm really passionate about in my job, and would like to be a part of that change and that movement. It's interesting when you're in something to kind of see its workings for the better and for the worse as well. Alongside, I guess, there's more kind of cultural approaches or attitudes really towards kind of commercial literary. It also made me realise where we buy books from. This is so linked to class. I mean, it's something that when I was a kid, I used to buy loads of books from Asda. They had a really good book selection, especially when I was little. But if you get a book as a publishing company into a supermarket, you will normally do really quite well. It can actually make a huge difference. Now I spend half my time looking in supermarkets and looking at what books have been picked and why. So when you next go into a supermarket, look at the books that are on the bookshelves and see any trends, see any names. You can automatically see some brands that you know are going to do really, really well, brand authors I mean, in supermarkets. What I find interesting, especially online as a bookish person, that I never really see someone say, oh, I went to Asda and bought this book. I went to Waterstones and I bought this book. I went to an independent bookshop and I bought this book. It's fascinating because so many people buy their books from their supermarkets, but they might not necessarily be what we stereotype as being like proper readers, which again links into the whole class discussion and again commercial fiction. Now we have to talk about Amazon. I know no one wants to, but we must. It's a beast of a company, but it makes a huge amount of difference between the success of different books. And as a person who works in digital publishing, I spend all of my time on Amazon. First up, Amazon reviews. Amazon reviews make such a huge difference to the success of a book. I spend half my time emailing everybody from Netgalley. Netgalley is a review site where you can request books and you can download them to leave a review. I spend my life emailing our Netgalley reviewers to put their reviews on Amazon. It helps the algorithm. No one knows about the Amazon algorithm. I have no clue. I don't think anybody knows. Amazon is very secretive, like every corporation, about their algorithm. But we think it helps. Whenever I go on Amazon, I always make sure to look at the subtitle. If you've noticed, majority of books have their title and then they have like a feel-good book of the summer. They have all those keywords put in the subtitle to make it as searchable as possible. So whenever I go and look for a book, I also now notice what subtitle they're using, what keywords they're using, what's popular. The whole thing is you want to make everything as searchable as possible. One thing I do notice is the A+ pages and the extra images that are on Amazon pages. This is stuff because I spend my time designing them and because I put it all in, I spend a lot of time noticing how publishers design theirs up, what they're doing. Are they using user-generated content like people's Instagrams? Are they just using quotes? How do they look? In the same way, because I spend a lot of my time looking at copy, I look at kind of the copy or the blurb of the book and seeing where they've entered extra stuff to make that as searchable as possible as well. This is much more of an editorial thing. I personally don't write the copy for our books. I write obviously all of our social media copy, which again is informed by editorial, but I don't touch the book itself. I spend a lot of my time looking at copy just in terms of social media, looking at our books, and I like seeing the different trends that move on. Different types of genres also like different types of copy. I also look for changes in copy quite a lot and wonder why publishers have changed that. One thing I had no clue about before working in publishing is that copy, the blurb, the covers change, especially in commercial fiction when you can change really quickly. It changes because maybe it's just not reacting well on Netgalley. Maybe reviewers aren't quite getting it. We use all the information from the reviewers to make that book as good as possible and as marketable as possible. So next time you leave a Netgalley review, remember that there's a marketer like me who's probably reading your review and using it for feedback to editorial, because trends change all of the time, so does the copy that's used and so does the cover, and cover changes are my favourite thing in the entire world. Sometimes publishers will look at their backlist titles, the slightly older titles in their kind of publications, and decide to rejacket them, to give them a new look, to make them more popular, just to kind of fit in with what's working right now, especially if they're already established in maybe a genre that's suddenly kind of being really successful on the Amazon chart. That's another thing, the Amazon chart. I spent all my days looking at Amazon. I just realised I need to speak more about Amazon very quickly. The Amazon chart I am obsessed with because that is where we look for our books. We need them in the top 100 of Amazon. It's something we fight for. My entire energy at work is put into the Amazon chart. Each cover change, each copy has an intended reader, it has an intended audience, and if that audience changed or maybe it hasn't reached quite the right audience and maybe people were disappointed because it wasn't the book they thought they were getting, everything is always taken into consideration, and we want to make sure stuff works. And I think changes happen because we're not going to stick for something that just hasn't worked when we can change it. I'm trying to think about what else. There must be so many things that I think about now. I feel like so many of them are Amazon based. Netgalley, I spend all my life on Netgalley now, pulling up books, accepting, declining requests on Netgalley. I have the power, especially on BookTube with a lot of people using Netgalley to read books. One thing I would suggest for your Netgalley profile is making sure you've got your social media really, really clear, and making sure that you have a 50% plus feedback rate. I know it says 80, please just get over 50% because I can go and have a look and see how many books you've accepted and how many you've reviewed. And if you've reviewed like nothing, you will just lose out big time. So just request little and you'll be so much better in the long run. In terms of social media, as I just said, I spend a lot of my time looking for bloggers and Instagrammers and reviewers like through social media. Please make sure you have your country and your email in your bio, because I'm not gonna like press that kind of email button because I'm often on my phone and it's not necessarily linked to the email that I use for work. So if you put your country in your email, you are more likely to be put on blogger lists because it is easy to contact you, especially when not all of our proofs can go out internationally, so we need to know where you're from. There are a lot of things that just, as a reviewer, I guess, as someone who's on the internet and who now works in publishing, I realise how expensive proofs are and how much work goes into them. I'd also say that my viewers, myself as a content creator, has changed because I spend half my time looking at data. Like I do a weekly report of social media analytics and a quarterly one, and I'm really looking at like click-through rate, impression, engagement rates, following numbers obviously, and I really analyse it and look at it in quite a lot of detail. So when I go onto my own social media, it is really hard not to do that for myself. And believe me, looking at your YouTube studio after a day of analysing data can make me feel shit when I look at my click-through rate or my impressions or how long people have actually watched the video for. In the same way that I just stay away from my insights on Instagram, even though Instagram I don't really care that much about, but in terms of insights, but YouTube Studio can sometimes be a really horrible place mentally for me if I spent the day analysing data, and then I have to remind myself that I'm analysing stuff for a company and that things fluctuate over time, and I don't have to take that kind of work mindset and apply it to my own social media. Otherwise, there would be very little joy in all of this. Because I've been both sides, because I've been the person who has sent the proof and the person who has received the proof, I think I'm more thankful of those publishers, but I'm also more grateful to the reviewers who are so supportive of our social media and who really take time out, because I'm aware they're not getting paid for it, they're not getting much from it. And it's about making an authentic conversation and dialogue with people and not using people. And I hope that my experience of being on the other side probably makes me a better marketeer in a way, because I know how they work. I love how this video was supposed to be me talking about being a reader and how publishing impacted that, and then it just became something else. But I hope it was interesting. It would be fascinating to me if you work in publishing, or whether you don't work in the book industry, but whether your job affects reading in a different way. Maybe you work in copywriting. I think every job, every life affects how you read and how you approach books, and for lots of different reasons, not just because of your career. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I will see you again soon with another bookish video.